She has a 5 years experience in QHSE in both government and private sector in the Philippines and United Arab Emirates. She is currently working as a senior HSE Tech in oil and gas company, a graduate of Bachelor of Engineering in Electrical and Electronics Engineering from Heriot-Watt University, and currently completing her Masters of Business Administration. She attended various trainings such as ISO Auditor and Awareness courses like 45,001, 14,001, and many more. Completed NIBOSH IGC, NIBOSH Fire Safety and Risk Management, a postgraduate course in Occupational Health and Safety, Solid Waste Management, Occupational Health and Safety Advanced Diploma, and ongoing NIBOSH International Diploma in Occupational Health Safety. Ang rami niyang NIBOSH po. So she is a safety advocate, a filsa secretary. And with that, I would like to ask for your full attention during this session, and let's give a virtual round of applause to our presenter, Engineer Jurafil Rosarda.
All right. So, nakikita na po ba yung screen ko? Tsaka clear ba yung voice ko?
Sorry, visible po yung screen, clear po. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Okay, so once again, hello sa lahat. Good afternoon here in Dubai and Qatar. And good evening naman dyan sa Pilipinas. And welcome sa ating training session titled ISO 14001-2015 Environmental Management System. No? So I hope na mag-stick kayo till the end, no? Kasi napakaraming information na na-receive nyo in every week dahil iba't ibang management system yung tinatalakay natin, no? But anyway, it's just the same concept. The difference is ano-ano ba yung objective ng bawat system, bawat framework, right? So for today, we will be discussing about what is environmental management system. Ano ba yung intended outcomes nito? Ano-ano yung mga benefits at bakit kailangan nating i-implement ang environmental management system. And then we'll proceed directly to discuss one of the well-known framework for environmental management system, which is the ISO 40001, right? And this follows the plan, do, check, act cycle, right? So at the end of this training, everyone is expected to understand ano ba ang environmental management system, its importance, and its benefits. No? Everyone's also expected to know the key areas of environmental management system as per the standard ISO 14001, which we will be discussing. And lastly, for you to have the basic knowledge, paano ba ma-implement ang environmental management system, which is the objective of this management system awareness month. So for us to understand what is environmental management system, paano ba siya nabuo, we first need to understand sustainability. Right? So ano ba yung sustainability? Lagi kasing sinasabi na when it comes to environment, dapat we need to be sustainable, etc. No? So what's sustainability? Sustainability means fulfilling the needs of the current generations without compromising the needs of the future generation. In layman's term, lahat ng na-enjoy natin ngayon, lahat ng ginagamit natin ngayon, either its needs or wants, dapat ma-enjoy din ng future generation, which is yung mga kabataan, mga anak nyo, magiging anak, magiging apo. No? Hindi natin kina-compromise, hindi sila yung nag-a-adjust. Dapat pare-parehas na na-enjoy yan. Right? So upon describing what sustainability, ano ba yung sustainable development? No? It's a carefully planned strategy of embracing the growth while using the resources more efficiently. So basically, it's a strategy how we will fulfill the needs of the current generation. No? Paano natin pagpaplanuhan na masisigurado natin na kung ano yung meron tayo ngayon is meron din yung future generation. Okay? So ang sustainable development ay may tatlong pillars. This is the environmental, economic, and social. Economic being building a sustainable, strong, competitive economy. There's more on the business to ensure na dapat yung kanilang operation is sustainable. Wala silang nako-compromise na needs of the people as well as in resources. Social inclusion means initiatives, public policies, planning, regulation, supporting social issues. And lastly is the environmental protection. This is the most popular pillar of the sustainable development. Kaya kanina nasabi natin, when we hear the word sustainability or sustainable development, we always immediately say environment, which means preservation of environment and natural resources and minimizing the environmental impacts. This is for the people. Everything is towards the people to make sure that they'll be able to enjoy those needs. And ISO, being an international organization, hello? Yeah. Okay. So, pakimute na lang po yung mic. All right. So, again, ISO being an international organization, they're supporting yung goals ng United Nations. If you're familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, so part of that, ISO has developed this standard, which is the 14,001, which tackles the environmental pillar of sustainable development, the environmental protection. So that's why we will be discussing the environmental management system. So if you will remember, dun po sa mga naka-attend ng training natin last week and the previous week, we have defined management system. So just a quick recap, ano ba ang system? It's a set of regularly interacting interdependent elements which work together as a whole. An example of that is solar system. Yung katawan natin, may system din tayo. It consists of different parts which makes that coordinate together para mangyari yung isang bagay. So let's say sa katawan natin may circulatory system tayo which yung different parts ng circulatory system are working together to ensure na dadalo yung dugo natin sa buong katawan natin. So that's what a system is. But syempre, as a system, dapat you need to make sure na hindi lang sila basta nag-work. You need to make sure na yung system na yun is working towards a specific objective. That's why we're managing that, and that's where the management system comes into the picture. It's the way in which an organization manages these interrelated parts, which is basically the system, in order to achieve its objectives. And you'll be able to find the same definition if you will go inside the ISO 14001 standard. So we have discussed different management system, quality, and energy, occupational health and safety. But what is environmental management system? So using the same definition of the management system, in way which organization manages those parts in order to achieve its objectives. Environmental management system, ano ba yung pinaka-objective? Syempre, going back sa kanina, sa sustainable development, it's the preservation and protection of the environment. So yun yung gusto mong i-achieve na objective. So environmental management system, it's a framework that helps organization to achieve its environmental goals, which is the same definition of management system, through a set of processes, practices, which helps organization reduce its environmental impacts and increase its operating efficiency. So that's the main purpose of that's the main definition of environmental management system. It's a framework that helps us achieve our environmental goals. So now, after defining EMS, ano ba yung 14,001? Kasi may iba't iba tayong framework eh. So for sure, for bigger organization, for government, they tend to follow different framework. Kasi yun yung mas applicable sa kanilang operation. While for 14,001, obviously, this is intended for any type of organization, any type of establishment, any sector. So this is easier to be applied. But after assessing syempre yung operation nyo, yung nature of activity, doon lang kayo mag-a-adjust kung ano ba yung dapat nyong baguhin. So ISO 14001 is an internationally agreed system which sets out requirements for environmental management. So it provides organization with a framework to protect environment and respond to changing environmental conditions. If you can see in the screen, ang ISO 14001-2015 also follows the same cycle as what you can see from the previous management system na pinag-usapan natin, no? Which makes it easier to be integrated, especially with occupational health and safety, with quality, with energy, with safety, and other management systems pa. So it follows the cycle of PDCA, P being the planning, in the do part, covers the support and operation. In the check part, you have the performance evaluation. And in the act part, you have the improvement. No? So what is the intended outcome of the EMS? Bakit ba kailangan natin itong i-implement? Ano ba yung makukuha natin? Right? So first is to enhance our environmental performance. No? So maybe for the previous years, tayo yung tipo ng company na basta na lang gumagamit ng resources, no? Without thinking kung ano ba yung magiging epekto nito. So through EMS, we'll be able to be more aware of our obligation to our environment para mas ma-enhance pa natin yung environmental performance natin. Also, to fulfill yung compliance obligations na tinatawag natin, yung mga legal requirements, as well as kung ano ba yung needs and expectations sa'yo ng interested parties mo. And lastly, to achieve yung environmental objective. No? As you know that considering the changes in our environment and the climate, we're becoming more aware. We have sets of objectives that we want to achieve for our environment. So through EMS, it helps us to achieve that by setting a framework. So paano ba nag-work ang environmental management system? EMS of ISO 14001 provides framework and guidance for specific programs that the organization can implement. Through EMS, organizations can set goals for their environmental performance. As mentioned, kung kayo yung tipo ng organization na hindi nyo kino-consider yung impact ninyo sa environment, it will help you, no? How you can increase your environmental performance by setting goals and objectives, targets. It also helps in the implementation by running your activities to meet these goals. You're tailoring your activities in such a way na in every step of the way, kino-consider nyo yung tinatawag nating aspect and impact. And lastly, to continuously improve our performance. So this year, ito yung current performance natin, environmental performance. With EMS, it helps us continually improve, no? And by improvement, hindi naman entirely buong aspeto ng organization yung already nag-improve. It can also be a certain element of your organization. And that's the reason why we're calling it continual improvement. But syempre, ang EMS, hindi siya magiging successful without the commitment of the organization. And that's the success factor of this management system. And when we say commitment of the organization, we're not talking about yung top management. Kasi whenever we say commitment, organization is always the top. No, it's not that. We're always considering the entire organization. No? At a management, it can either be a person or a group, no? And by organization, it also covers the employees, no? Those at the bottom line of your activity, of your operation, the middle line, the top line, lahat yon are involved. No? So, kahit na committed yung management nyo sa taas, you have the policy, if hindi naman ini-implement sa baba, if hindi naman fina-follow ng mga workers, what's the point, di ba? Hindi magiging fully effective yung management system natin. And same, it goes all the way. Kaya tayo nagbibuild ng culture. No? Yun, sa safety nga, tawag natin is safety culture. So, meron din yun sa environment. We're trying to build that. And syempre, through the systematic approach of EMS, in the long term, it provides management options for contributing to sustainable development. Now, being able to contribute takes a long time in environment. Hindi natin agad nakikita yung outcome, no? But obviously, with the systematic approach, it will do in the long run. So ano-ano ba yung benefits ng environmental management system? First is it helps us manage our aspects, no, from our activities. Later on, we will define what's the aspect and impact, and also minimize the impact of those aspects in our environment. Syempre, it also helps us meet our compliance obligations. No? As mentioned earlier, that's one of the intended outcome of EMS. Through EMS as well, nagkakaroon tayo ng competitive advantage. Nowadays, clients, customers, they tend to select companies who are more into who are concerned more in the environment. That's why whenever there's a bid or tendering, they always look whether are we implementing environmental management system. It also helps organization to effectively manage resources. So not just financially, na syempre, if we manage our resources efficiently rin, we're reducing the cost of our operations, but as well as help in reducing yung mga resources na ginagamit natin, thereby helping preserving the environment. It also facilitates active employee engagement and participation in environmental management. So mas nafe-feel ng employees natin bakit natin kailangan i-implement ang environmental management system. Mas maiintindihan nila. And thereby, they will have an improved knowledge and awareness on environmental issues. What's their role? Why they need to do this? They will be more aware. It also helps organization to actively contribute to pollution minimization and environmental protection. And lastly, it helps us preserve the financial, social, and environmental resources. And this last is basically pertains to the sustainable development. So after discussing about the basic knowledge of environmental management system, let's discuss about the specific framework of ISO 14001, environmental management system. So if you will see, this is somewhat similar. This is similar actually to what was presented in the previous training of occupational health and safety, even in the quality and the energy. So this standard has 10 clauses. With the first one gives a background about the standard. Ano ba yung scope nung 14,001, normative references, and ano-ano ba yung terms and definitions na ginamit for this standard. So it'll be really helpful if you will read the standard and then you will refer to this first 3 clauses. And yung clauses 4 to 10, ito na yung pinaka-implementing clauses. So sa clause 4 tayo mag-i-start when it comes to the implementation of the environmental management system. And going back dun sa PDCA cycle, ito yung pinag-referan natin kanina about sa PDCA. So with context of organization and leadership, ang context, ito yan, dito sa taas, it defines ano ba yung pinaka border ng ating management system, and leadership is here in the middle. Ibig sabihin, all throughout the cycle, present yung leadership, no? Planning, clause 6 will be in the P, and then this support and operation will be covered by the do part. And this performance evaluation will be here in the check. And lastly, yung improvement natin will be in the act. Right? So, hold on. Let me just clear the screen. Okay. Right? So let's first discuss context of organization. Okay. So sa context of organization, there are 4 subclauses, which mainly pertains to the understanding of the organization and its context, the internal and external issues. Then we will also discuss about the needs and expectations of interested parties. Sino-sino ba yung mga interested parties na to? Ano-ano ba yung mga needs and expectations nila? Ano rin ba yung scope ng environmental management system? How do we determine that? Lastly, the environmental management system itself. Sino ba yung pinaka mag-i-implement? Sino yung pinaka-accountable? Okay. So 4.1, understanding the context, the organization and its context. According sa standard, organization should determine the external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and affect its ability to achieve the intended outcomes of environmental management system. Ano-ano ba yung mga external and internal issues na pwedeng makaapekto sa organization natin? Kung gusto nating ipa-implement yung environmental management system, na pwedeng mag-hinder, no, sa atin para ma-achieve yung intended outcome, yung tatlo na yon, enhancement of environmental performance, no, compliance, meeting the compliance obligation, and then yung achieving the environmental objective, yung tatlong yon. Ano-ano ba yung mga issues, no? So as per definition, internal and external issues are the circumstances, characteristics, and changes which can either positively or negatively influence the environmental management system and its intended outcome. So as mentioned rin, hinihiram ko po to sa previous presentation ni President Albino about sa occupational health and safety, no? Na kung saan ang pinaka well-known tool na ginagamit natin to identify internal and external issue is yung SWOT analysis. Ito na yung yung iba ginagawa, kino-combine nila yung sa pestle analysis, but the easiest way is use the SWOT analysis, which basically describes S for strength, weakness, W for weakness, O for opportunities, and T for threats. No, if you will see in this chart, this picture, no, we have strengths na kung sa pinag-uusapan natin. What do we do well? Ano yung ginagawa natin ngayon? No, na ito yung kumbaga parang ito yung ibinibenta natin na kaya natin gawin. No? Ano ba yung mga weaknesses natin? Ano ba yung mga hindi natin ginagawa ngayon ng maayos? Saan ba tayo medyo mahina? No? And ano ba yung opportunities? Ano yung mga pwede natin gawin to improve? And lastly, is threats. Ano yung pwede maka-apekto sa atin which may cause difficulties in achieving what we need to achieve, yung intended outcome. So on this side, on the left side, you will see there's an external and internal origin. So this top part, ang strengths and weaknesses, ito yung mga inherent na currently na meron na yung organization. That's why we call it internal origin. And basically, ito yung internal issues natin. Ano yung external origin naman natin is ito yung mga pwedeng maka-apekto sa atin, no? Either positively or negatively. No? Which we will be discussing later on, specifically yung risks and opportunities. No? So, syempre, according sa standard, pwede nating kuhanin yung pwede nating i-consider itong mga following na to in determining yung internal and external issues, yung environmental conditions such as yung air quality, water quality, no? Yung availability ng resource. No? That can either affect the organization's purpose or be affected by its aspects. No? Let's say yung natural resource availability, medyo scarce na siya, no? Pero yung sa trabaho natin, napaka-high consuming natin. So that'll be one of the issues that we will have to consider. Also, the external, cultural, social, political, legal, regulatory, financial, economic, natural, and competitive circumstances.
Ma'am, nawala po kayo.
Hello? Hello po. Okay na po.
Okay na po.
Okay, alright. Sige po. So, ayun. As mentioned, external factors, no? Yung political. So, baka merong mga bagong batas about environment. Si DENR na i-release. Syempre, we need to consider that. We need to make sure that we're following that. And maybe yung bagong batas na yun will greatly affect yung current operations natin. Yeah? So, let's say, bawal gumamit ng plastic, ay kayo ang producer ng plastic. Diba? So, that's one of the external issues that we need to consider. Hello, pakimute na lang po yung ano. Right, okay. Yeah. Then internal characteristics of the organization, such as activities, products, services, strategic direction, culture, and capabilities. One example is yung napaka-diverse na culture dito sa Middle East, no? Baka yung bawat policy or yung programs nyo, ito yung pinapa-implement nyo, hindi maintindihan ng mga tao. Kasi yung ginagamit yung language is hindi naman sila ganong kabihasa. No? So that's one of the internal issues. So understanding the needs of expectations of interested parties. By interested parties, ito yung sinasabi natin na stakeholders, kumbaga nga sa business. No? So sino-sino ba yung may stake, may interest sa ginagawa natin? Ano-ano ba yung pangangailangan nila? So one way to identify your needs and expectations is to first identify the relevant interested parties. Sino-sino ba yung interested parties ninyo? Siyempre, bawat organization will have their own interested parties. No? But yung pinaka-common, siyempre, is yung tao mo, no? Your employees, your management, the government itself. You need to make sure that you're following the regulations. The client, customer, obviously, that's the reason why you're running a business. They have a stake in your business. The local community, siyempre, kung saan ka nag-ooperate, you need to make sure that they're not affected by it. Lastly, contractors. No? There are many more other interested parties, such as suppliers. No? Then we need to classify them accordingly to make it easier. Sino-sino ba yung mga internal and external interested parties mo? Then afterwards, you need to determine their needs and expectations. Ano-ano ba yung mga high-level needs and expectations na sa tingin mo, meron itong interested parties? So let's say, si employee, ang kanyang requirement from you sa organization is need to make sure na safe, that they're working in a safe and healthy environment. It's a combination of safety, kasi syempre, nagtatrabaho sila, they need to be safe. As well as environment. Kasi dapat isabihin, kapag hindi safe yung environment na yun, you're also, diba? You're also not meeting that environmental side na baka nakaka-apekto rin dun sa environment. So let's say, gumagamit sila ng nagtatrabaho sila, gumagamit sila ng isang equipment, napaka-taas ng emission nito, ng carbon monoxide. So not only you're damaging the environment, but you're also putting your people at risk. No? Then Lastly, you need to rank them in terms of power and interest. Kasi syempre sa dami na needs and expectation, no? Hindi mo naman pwedeng sabing ibaliwala si kliyente kasi sila yung bumubuhay ng business mo eh. Kaso hindi naman pwedeng baliwalain mo rin yung pangailangan ng government kasi kaya ka nga naka-operate dahil sa kanila, no? Hindi mo rin pwedeng baliwalain yung employees kasi kaya ka nga may napoproduce dahil meron kang tao, no? So dapat kailangan natin ma-identify sino-sino ba yung kailangan natin i-prioritize. Kasi later on, itong needs and expectations, mapapasama yan dun sa tinatawag nating compliance obligation, which later i-discuss natin siya. Okay? So, ang most common na ginagamit dito is yung tinatawag nating stakeholder analysis. Kung saan, if you can see on the chart, ma-identify nyo sino-sino yung kailangan nyo i-manage closely, sino yung okay lang na i-inform nyo, sino yung dapat nyo i-satisfy, at sino lang yung kailangan nyo i-monitor. So obviously, hindi naman natin na medyo ma-elaborate to stakeholder analysis. You can search for it. But that's one of the tool being used to assess the needs and expectation of interested parties. So ito yung mga example na needs and expectations, no, of interested parties. So if you can see here in the on the left side, we have the interested party. Ito yung mga na-identify natin. So we have the employees, management, neighbors, which is yung local community, regulators, customers and business partners, contractors, supplier. Then as mentioned kanina, sinabi natin ay identify nyo sino-sino yung ano ba sila, internal ba sila or external interested parties. So you identify them accordingly, no? Ito yung mga internal natin, ito rin yung mga external natin. Then we will identify ano-ano ba yung mga needs and expectations nila. So since this is a combination kasi of health, safety, and environment, so you will see some items na involving din yung safety, no? So let's say dito, isa sa expectation ng employee is to be aware of the health, safety, and environmental management system, no? So they need to have the training of the awareness system. So ano ba yung management component? Ano yung bang action ninyo, di ba? So dito is training will be provided to your employees, right? So same with the regulators, let's say external. Compliance with the applicable HSC laws and regulation. That's their expectation from you. And ikaw, being company, need to ensure that the HSEMS maintains compliance with applicable laws and regulations. You need to report and address any HSC non-compliance which may occur. So there's no specific format how you will map your interested parties and their needs and expectation, but it will be good to have a systematic way of analyzing them. Ang hinihingi lang na standard is basically for you to identify your interested parties and what's their needs and expectations. All right, 4.3. Determining the scope of environmental management system. So according sa standard, the organization should determine the boundaries and applicability of environmental management system para ma-establish mo yung scope mo. Siyempre, for some organization, lalo na kung parang malaking international organization, malaki ang organization, they might want to implement EMS on a specific part of their business lang. So let's say kung meron silang manufacturing, fabrication, logistics, gusto lang nila yung manufacturing and fabrication ng cover, no? And on this specific location lang. So yun lang yung i-consider, no? During the during the certification. But syempre, you need to consider then, no, as part of your continual improvement, how you can implement EMS on a bigger scope. Now, that's why we need to consider the following when establishing the scope. External and internal issues, as mentioned kanina. Ano-ano ba yun? Yung compliance obligations that we need to comply. We need to also consider organizational units, functions, and physical boundaries when we're determining the scope. Ano-ano ba yung mga activities, products, and services na gusto nating included sa ating scope of EMS. And lastly is yung authority and ability to exercise control and influence. As mentioned, na parang this time, gusto nyo sa isang function lang ng company ninyo, but kung meron kayang influence, no, and ability to control nga yung other side or other aspect of your business, you may want to also include them in your scope. Lalo na kung malaki yung influence nila sa environment, malaki yung impact nila. Okay. When we have identified the scope and we want to establish the EMS, we need to make sure who's the authorized and accountable to its fulfillment. And mainly, it will be the organization. Organization retains the authority and accountability to decide how it will fulfill the requirements, including the level of detail and extent to which it establishes one or more processes. So in this case, we're discussing about the top management. So by top management, we mean those with direct reports under them. Okay. So they're expected to be accountable and have the authority to decide how to fulfill EMS. One of that is to make sure na you're establishing one or more processes to control your activities and minimize yung environmental impacts. You need to, they're also accountable to ensure na mai-integrate nila yung EMS requirements into various business processes. To make such as design and development, procurement, human resource. And lastly, organization are expected to incorporate issues associated dun sa context of organization and interested party requirements, which is yung internal and external issues at your needs and expectation with the environmental management system. So we always need to consider them because that's the reason why we're implementing EMS. That's for them. Okay. So natapos na tayo sa context of organization. We have already defined yung ating internal and external issues, no? Na-discuss din natin yung interested parties, sino-sino ba sila, ano ba yung needs and expectation, ano ba yung possible scope of environmental management system, which we mentioned, it will be up to you to define it. And lastly, sino ba yung pinaka-accountable, no? When it comes sa implementation ng environmental management system. So bukas makalawa, kung merong problema sa management system ninyo, meron kayong hindi na-achieve, alam nyo sino yung pinaka-accountable doon, diba? Normally, it will be the top management because they're the implementing body of the organization. Sila yung nagbibigay ng supervision, sila yung nagmi-make ng decision. So anything that they have decided will impact the entire organization. Okay. So now we will discuss about leadership. Under the leadership clause, there's 3 subclauses: leadership and commitment, environmental policy, and organizational roles, responsibilities, and authority. Okay. So hold on. Right. Leadership and commitment. So leadership and commitment from the organization's top management is critical for success of EMS to achieve the intended outcomes, yung tatlo nga kanina. So it requires top management to learn and understand what the standard means when it says protect the environment. And also the top management must take accountability for the effectiveness of EMS, right? So that's the reason why if you will notice, in a company, whenever we try to implement the management system, we first need to send the top management for specific training. Itong awareness, actually, based on my experience talaga, is yung mga decision makers of the company, they're being sent first to the awareness training because they need to know ano ba yung kailangan nilang gawin, about saan ba yung standard. Kasi kung parang bigla na lang kayo mag-isip na i-implement, syempre, they need to know what's in it for the company, di ba? They need to understand bakit kailangan natin ma-implement. And that's the essence of this awareness. No? Na parang, we need to know ano ba yung basic components, ano ba yung mga kailangan gawin ng isang tao, and ano-ano ba yung mga kailangan nilang i-consider during the implementation. And they need to, for this management system environment, they need to understand ano ba yung pinaka-intended outcome. Ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng protect the environment. Kasi sila rin yung magde-decide how can they protect the environment by changing the process itself, diba? Sometimes, yung mga dati yung ginagawa, purchase kayo ng panibagong equipment, you'll adopt new process just to make sure na lesser yung impact nito sa environment. And they need to make sure then na effective yung kanilang ini-implement. No? Which later on, we will discuss in the check-in part, why we have the management review. Syempre, some of the personal accountabilities of the organization, the top management, is just to make sure that EMS is effective. They need to demonstrate leadership and commitment, especially in the implementation of EMS, communicate the importance of effective environmental management system, and conforming to the requirements of the standard. Not just to the standard, but as well as to the compliance obligations. Directing and supporting persons to contribute to the effectiveness of environmental management system. As they are the leaders, they need to demonstrate so that the people will follow. And they should also promote continual improvement. Lastly, support other relevant management roles to demonstrate their leadership. Because leadership doesn't just mean na nasa top management. It can also be down the line. The supervisors. No? You, as an employee, can also be a leader. Diba? So, you need to demonstrate and help you how you can apply yung sinasabi natin leadership and be accountable. No? Some of the responsibilities that can be delegated is make sure, let's say, we need to make sure na yung environmental policy and objectives are established and compatible with the strategic direction and context of the organization. That's why we pass this responsibility to another department, let's say to the HSC department, diba? So the HSC department will propose something, but it will be up to the company whether they can commit to that. No? Ensuring the integration of environmental management requirements. So that covers not just the HSC, but as well the operations. We need to make sure na ina-adapt nila kung ano yung na-establish na proseso. Need to make sure also that EMS achieves that intended outcome. So paano masabi na achieve mo yung intended outcome? Syempre, through the help of your people down the line. Now, they're the one who's working on it, implementing it, doing it. Need to make sure that while we're doing our normal operation is nasa-satisfy din natin yung intended outcome natin. And yung resources needed natin for environmental management system are available. No? If meron kayong programa, saan makipangailangan nyo, syempre, you need to delegate the job to ensure na lahat ng resources, identify yung resources na yun, and then make sure that they're available. Lastly, is ensure that environmental management system achieves its intended outcome, as mentioned earlier. So that's some of the responsibilities and accountabilities covered by the leadership and commitment. So environmental policy. Policy is a set of principles stated as commitments in which top management outlines the intentions of organization to support and enhance its environmental performance. Reason why I have highlighted commitment kasi the policy is not just a piece of paper na parang obligated ka, diba? When you make the policy, you need to make sure that you can implement it. Sabi nga nila, no, walk the talk, No? Kung ano yung sinabi mo, dapat kaya mong gawin, kaya mong panindigan. So kung yung policy natin, hindi lang basta naman yung copy and paste eh. So dapat kung ano yung nakasulat doon, sigurado yung management na kaya nilang gawin yun. Kaya bukas makalawa, di ba? Kung kunyari, hindi ka makapag-implement ng isang programa, di ba? Na sabi natin, hindi na tayo gagamit ng, ng plastic eh. Kaso sabi ng management, hindi pwede, kailangan nating kailangan nating, hindi, okay lang yun, gumamit pa rin kayo. So be it. Pwede mong iba to sa kanya na parang, hindi, nakalagay sa policy natin, kayo yung pumirma na poprotektahan natin yung environment natin. Magre-reduce tayo ng waste generation natin, etc. Diba? So, yun, kailangan, yung nakasulat sa policy is kaya niyong gawin. Commitment niyo yan eh. That's what you want. That's what you're committed to do. This policy helps organization to set its environmental objectives, take actions to achieve the intended outcome, and achieve the continual improvement. Okay. So when we make the policy, there's 3 things that we need to remember. Tawag natin dyan is PIC, no? P-I-C. So pag gagawa tayo ng policy ng ENS, just 3 items. PIC, P stands for protect the environment. You need to be committed to protect the environment. I for improvement. You need to also commit yourself to continual improvement of your environmental management system. And lastly, C is to compliance. Comply with the organizational's compliance obligations. If you will remember, ito rin yung intended outcome na na-identify natin kanina. No? Protection of environment will later enhance your environmental performance, improve continuously, no? Continual improvement, and comply with the organization's compliance obligation. So an example of environmental and sustainability policy, for others kasi it's a combination, you'll notice na it's already integrated yung requirements, yung policy ng health, ng quality, ng environment, the safety, even security, no? So an example of the environmental policy is ABC company and all its associated companies are committed to protect the environment through what? Compliance with applicable environmental legal requirements. So doon kanina sa 3 points, yung PIC, na-meet na natin yung C, di ba? Compliance. Dapat committed tayo. Prevention of pollution and more efficient use of resources. So ito rin yung nabanggit natin kanina. P, protect the environment. No? Establish of suitable objectives and implementation. And lastly, continual improvement of all related programs. So that's for I, continual improvement. Improve continually. So, na-meet natin yung first 3 items na dapat natin consider, yung PIC. Okay. So here, na-mention na we believe in careful work structuring. In line with this, we are committed to the following: efficient resource utilization, mitigation of material impacts, effective waste management, mitigation of emissions, energy efficiency. So obviously, bawat policy will contain different commitments. So as long as the company can make sure that they can do it. No? There's no one policy tailored for all. So here, as you can see, the general manager has the overall responsibility for this policy and is committed to the full support of the sustainability program. Okay, this is signed by the general manager. Okay, so if pirmahan ba to ng let's say ng supervisor or ng QHSE manager, mas magiging effective kaya yung policy? Wala naman sinasabi na wala naman sinasabi na dapat ang pipirma is itong tao na to. No? Walang sinabi ng gano'n. But why do we always consider the general managers, the chairman, the CEO? Kasi sila yung nasa top of the line, yung nasa pinakamataas, no? And being a leader, if they will be committed to this policy, susunod din yung mga tao. Kasi kapag kayang pipirman dyan is mas mababa, no? Baka hindi na yung sundin ng nasa taas. Nasa kanila technically yung decision making, di ba? Sila yung magde-decide what should we do, paano mag-operate yung business, etc. That's the reason why most of the time, always, we let the topmost person of the organization sign it to show commitment na everyone under him, either reporting to him, kahit ikaw pa yung pinamababa, you need to follow. No? Okay, 5.3, organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities. As mentioned here, top management shall ensure the responsibilities and authorities for relevant roles are assigned and communicated with the organization. So dapat ang top management rin shall assign responsibility and authority for ensuring that environmental management system conforms with the requirements of the international standards, and also reporting on the performance of environmental management system, including environmental performance to top management. Kasi syempre, nag-hire ang top management ng mga tao na nagmo-monitor niyan. Okay? Dapat masigurado na may nagmamanage ng EMS na yan, and ensure dapat masigurado din na sumusunod yung mga tao. Kailangan maging aware din sila. Ano ba yung estado? Nag-implement tayo nito eh. No? So, dapat malaman din nila ano na yung current performance. Nakakasunod ba tayo? Maayos, meron ba dapat tayong kailangan baguhin doon sa implementation natin para mas masigurado natin mas effective yung implementation. No? And they need to be aware, no? And communicated nga, sabi nga, assigned and communicated, na ito yung responsibility nila. Kaya most of the time, if you will read your job description, no, syempre, that's where the Department of HR will come into the picture, na in-integrate, no, yung requirements ng environment doon sa mismong job description mo. No? Para ikaw na empleyado, before ka mag-join ng company, aware ka, ano yung responsibility mo. No, kasi may system to eh. May environmental management system sila. So, dapat ikaw, susunod ka rin doon. Ano ba yung mga dapat mong gawin? Naka-detail lahat yun doon. So, some of the functions, no, and their roles in EMS implementation is, for example, top management, yung kanilang role or responsibility is sure na mako-communicate yung importance ng EMS sa buong organization. An example of that is yung environmental policy. So they need to also provide necessary resources by allocating a budget for environmental programs. They also need to track and review EMS performance, which is through management review. Sa purchasing department naman, meron kayong purchasing, they need to make ang role nila is to develop and implement process for controlling the purchase of chemical and other materials. So, syempre, may EMS ka, you need to make sure na yung mga bibilhin yung materials is less yung impact sa environment. Kung dati gumagamit kayo ng something na very dangerous, no? Meron naman yung, kung pinag-aralan nyo yung sa GHS, di ba? Meron yung mga items na dangerous para sa environment. So, you want to use something na hindi ganun, lesser yung impact niya. So, syempre, si purchasing, magkakaroon siya ng process. Paano niya masisigurado na hindi na less yung impact, no? Syempre, si human resource, as mentioned kanina, so they will integrate in the job description kung ano-ano ba yung environmental responsibilities ng bawat tao through the job description. They'll be aware ano yung dapat nilang gawin, no? They will also define the competency requirements of various EMS roles. No? Kasi may mga certain people that they will be responsible in maintaining the environmental management system, so they will define what exactly do they need. So they also need to integrate environmental management into their work, or discipline and appraisal system, no? Para mas ma-motivate yung tao to follow, to implement. No? Siyempre, yung mga maintenance department, yung operations mismo, they may need to implement a preventive maintenance program for key equipment that may cause environmental spill or incident. Okay? So, syempre, sa finance, I mentioned, they will prepare budgets for environmental programs, evaluate economic feasibility of environmental projects, track data environmental management costs. Now, as mentioned earlier kanina, one of the benefits nga is to manage yung resources natin. So, syempre sa engineering, during the design of products, we will consider yung environmental impact of those processes then and modified products, identify pollution prevention opportunities since they're the one responsible for the designing of the products or services. And line workers provide first-hand knowledge of environmental aspect. So even the people working down the line, they need to report, no? If nakita mo na hindi masyadong hindi masyado siya nakaka-apekto dun sa environment natin, maraming basura na na-generate dito sa ginagawa natin. Well, it's up to them to report it, diba? Raise it as a concern. And also support training for new employees. So now we're done with the leadership. We have discussed about what's their role, responsibilities, and as well as yung ano-ano ba yung mga dapat nating i-consider when identifying the roles and responsibilities of those people from the top down the line. Even the policy we have also discussed. So now we'll start with planning. So planning has two subclauses, which is the actions to address risks and opportunities and environmental objectives and planning to achieve them. So these are the main subclauses, but under that there are more specific clauses, no, with regards to the environmental aspect, risks and opportunities, compliance obligation, which we will be discussing naman as we move forward. Okay. Okay. So risks and opportunities. As mentioned kanina na syempre ang goal natin sa EMS is ma-achieve yung intended outcome niya, yung tatlo na yun na na-mention kanina, diba? We also want to prevent undesired effects to the environment. Lastly, for the continual improvement of our organization, management system. So, para ma-achieve natin itong nasa gitna na to, itong bilog na to, right? This one. We need to identify yung how we will address them. Ano ba yung mga actions na dapat natin gawin? Which is this one. So, para malaman natin kung ano yung mga dapat natin gawin, kailangan manggagaling yan normally sa other business processes. Kasi dyan napapasok yung sinasabi nating integration of EMS to the processes of the business. No? Meron din tayo dyang input from other management system. Kasi syempre, ang environment, it's not like it will only affect yung management system itself, operation itself na related lang sa environment. It will also affect others. So such as 45,001, 9,001, quality, health and safety. They'll also have input. And we will also have input from risks and opportunities. Doon sa ano-ano ba yung actions na kailangan natin gawin. And mention kanina, para malaman natin yung risks and opportunities, manggagaling yan sa environmental aspects. Okay? Later then, di-discuss natin yung ano ba yung environmental aspects. Yung compliance obligations. Okay? Sa mga sinusunod natin, malalaman din natin ano-ano ba dyan yung risks and opportunities natin. And lastly is yung issues and requirements. So part of this is yung internal and external issues natin. So upon identifying yung external and internal issues, gamit niya yung SWOT analysis, yung opportunity and threat, yung OMT na part ng SWOT, yun yung magiging risk and opportunities natin. Na magiging input dito sa ating diagram, which will help us identify ano-ano ba yung dapat natin gawin to achieve these 3 items. Okay? So for every activity, operations, no, there will be a risk and opportunity. No? So hihiramin ko yung ginamit ni Press na example, no, sa si Elon Musk, no, na example, na kung saan gusto magtayo ng isang malaking solar park. No? Siyempre, that will help us conserve energy. We'll be able to generate renewable siya. Diba? But siyempre, part of that, yung risk niya is mawawalan ng habitat yung mga hayop, no? And even the solar production of solar panels also have their own emissions, greenhouse gases, no? There will be also some chemical releases, but then again, you also have opportunities, renewable energy, no? Won't be dependent, no? And unlimited siya. So hindi ka nakaka-consume ng mga scarce resources such as oil, no? So in any activity, you will always have your risks and opportunities. What you need to do is you need to assess and address them. Okay? When you have risk, no, which is basically the adverse effect or threat, kung tawagin na rin natin para mas mahiwalay natin siya sa normal terminology ng risk ginagamit natin sa safety, no, threats, adverse effects. You need to address it. How will you lessen that? Okay? While in opportunity naman, you need to address it in such a way that it will help your organization to improve. Okay? So an example niyan is, let's say, in your activity, there's hazardous waste generation. No? So a likelihood niya is medium. Obviously, you will have your own criteria and matrix that you want to follow in identification of risks and opportunities. The easier the better. Kasi normally, parang ano lang siya, tabular lang yung assessment. But kung mas complex yung inyong activity, obviously, mas magiging complex yung matrix nyo in identification. No? To be able to really identify ano-ano yung risks and opportunities na yun. So as mentioned, some of your risks is greenhouse gas emissions, hazardous waste generation, community activism. So let's say in greenhouse gas emission, considerable facility energy usage. So syempre, kung ikaw may planta, no? Let's say yung planta na yun is nag-generate ka ng mataas na greenhouse gas emission. So that's a risk for you. No? That's a threat. No? Even with hazardous waste generation. So you may, dahil sa activity mo, baka mas mataas yung possibility na mag-generate ka pa ng hazardous waste in the near future. Dahil syempre, pataas ng pataas yung demand from your operation. Later on, masama niyan, baka magkaroon ka ng non-compliance, ma-finan ka ng government na bakit ganito nakadami. Siyempre, community activism. Siyempre, part of your job is to supply the needs of the people, but may mga tao minsan na they don't like what you're doing, even though you're trying to minimize your environmental impact. But you could not, kasi nga yung operation mo is talagang nagre-release kayo. So, hindi nyo naman wala kayong method to control it. Siyempre, magkakaroon ng activism from the community. So, yan yung mga possible risks. And ano-ano yung mga magiging opportunity niyan. syempre, ito yung risk mo, but you need to find a way how you can turn that risk into an opportunity. So let's say, dahil dyan sa greenhouse gas emission, maybe you can collect those CO2 as a chemical feedstock. Those hazardous waste generation, maybe you'll be able to find a way to reprocess or use them as raw materials. That's the reason why we have waste processing facilities, recycling facilities. No, you may be able to contact them and sell them your hazardous waste. Ikaw pa yung kikita. No? Community activism. No? Dahil dyan, baka mas maging ikaw na company, what you can do, you can implement programs where you'll be able to invite your community, local community. So hindi ka lang hindi lang nalilesen mo yung activism, but you're also having stakeholder engagement. Dahil na sila yung isa sa interested parties mo. So yung decisions mo ngayon, magiging involved rin sila. Mas magiging maayos yung implementation mo ng EMS kasi you have considered them as well. No? You're lessening the risk. You're increasing your opportunities. Also, some of the examples of opportunity, reduction of packaging disposal. That is sa amin dito, before na lagi kami gumagamit ng plastic, ngayon sa buong building namin, puro paper products na yung mga ginagamit namin. So, syempre, and yung iba, ina-encourage na magdala na lang sila ng kanilang lalagyanan rather than having their own. No? So, that's one way of reducing packaging disposal, mainly yung plastic. But syempre, again, the risk is you're using paper. Hazardous material reprocessing. You're thinking, you want to utilize yung hazardous waste generated. So that's one way of making a business again. Earning. At the same time, you're helping the environment because you're reprocessing it. Then stakeholder engagement. As mentioned kanina, periodic interaction with stakeholders enhances community goodwill. And syempre, it also increases your business reputation. So that's one way of marketing your business as well. Kasi nowadays, ang ginagamit na marketing ng mga companies is the CSR, corporate social responsibility. No? The more you involve yourself in the sustainability projects, the more you'll be able to market your company. There'll be more people will be more inclined to take your products or services kasi alam nila na committed ka to protect yung environment. So some of the risks and opportunities, risk is the water usage, no? Discharge of contaminated water. So some of the opportunities that we can consider is recycling of water, reusing them, or zero discharge. Use of hazardous chemical. So maybe we can use low hazard chemicals as part of our operation. So that's one opportunity. Energy consumption. Hindi naman mawala lagi yan. So maybe one of the things that we can address energy consumption is use of energy efficient equipment. Or maybe we can have our own source of renewable energy. So I'm not sure in the Philippines, but here in abroad, if meron silang mga planta, gumagamit na sila ng mga solar panels. No? Kasi anyway, malaki yung energy consumption na kailangan nila. So, para makatulong, what they'll do, they have their own plant itself para ma-minimize yung consumption ng energy with regards dun sa paggamit ng scarce resource. Dahil nga, most of the people here are dependent on natural resources, oil, diba? Workforce retirement. One of the opportunities to have succession planning, mentoring. Then community activism. So as mentioned, we can have shareholder and stakeholder engagement, which fosters a good relationship between the business and the community. Okay. All right. So we're now in the aspect and impact. Okay. According to the standard, the organization should determine the environmental aspect and their associated environmental impact of its activities, products, and services that it can control and those that it can influence. Sorry. So while determining the environmental aspect and their associated environmental impact, we must take into consideration the life cycle perspective. So later on, we will discuss about ano ba tong life cycle perspective na to. Bakit kailangan natin siyang i-consider when we do our assessment of risks and opportunities and identify yung aspects and impacts din. So identification and evaluation of significant environmental impacts can be done through the following. So first, we need to define ano ba yung scope ng EMS. So as mentioned nga kanina, is nasa sa company yung way how you will identify yung EMS and ano ba yung i-consider nyo na part ng scope nyo. So upon identifying yung EMS scope, you need to identify your environmental aspects. Okay? And upon identifying your aspects, also you will need to identify ano-ano ba yung kanilang impacts. Then, afterwards, you need to evaluate ano-ano ba yung significant environmental aspects, which will also have significant environmental impacts. Lastly, you need to find a way to manage your significant environmental aspects. Okay. So ano ba yung aspect? Ano ba yung impact? Yung aspect and impact, to make it easier, we can compare it to the hazards and risks. Aspects being equivalent to the hazard and impact being equivalent to the risk. Yung aspect, ito yung cause, no? At yung impact, ito yung epekto ng ginagawa. So, kaya yung bawat aspect na yun, may kanilang effect. Yun yung impact. So, that's the easiest definition of aspect and impact. And we identify aspect and impact with the help of environmental impact assessment. Okay. Ba't ba natin ginagawa yung EIA? Kumbaga nga, kasi yung EIA, it's a tool that helps us identify ano-ano yung mga significant impacts ng ginagawa natin sa environment. So you'll be able to see different ways of doing EIA, no? Especially ito ginagamit to sa mga bagong projects, no? Before ka makapag-start ng panibagong project sa isang lugar, you need to conduct first an EIA, and most of the time this is required by the regulatory body. Okay. So as mentioned, when we do EIA, we need to consider the life cycle perspective. So when we say life cycle, ito yung buong cycle ng isang product or services. You're considering from the design, procurement of raw materials, till the final disposal. Para siyang buhay ng instead na buhay ng tao, para siyang buhay ng isang produkto. Simula ng pagkabuo ng concept ng produkto hanggang matapon na ito, yun yung life cycle. So, sinasabi ng standard is, pag gagawa ka ng EIA, kailangan i-consider mo tong life cycle. So, yung sinasabi ng life cycle perspective, dapat ganun yung mindset mo, yun yung perspective mo. No? Now, i-consider mo yung buong proseso na yun. Up to the level na kung saan pwedeng ma-influence ng organization yung sa buong process na yun. So, as you can see here, we need to consider ano yung magiging environmental impacts ng bawat decision that we're making or activities that we're doing in this entire life cycle. So sa design itself, no, you need to consider ano-ano ba yung environmental requirements. So syempre, sa design, kayo yung magde-define ano-ano ba yung mga equipment na kakailanganin nyo during the activity. Ano-ano ba yung mga materials na kakailanganin nyo. Maybe some of them is hazardous to the environment. No? And maybe wala ka pa ngayong nakikitang magiging problema sa mismong design, but once it's implemented, baka naman magkaroon na ng environmental impact. So let's say, gumagawa ka ng bote ng tubig. So nung time na ginawa yung plastic, sorry, okay, pa-mute na lang po Right. Okay. So, yun. So, siguro, mention nga, nung time na ginawa yung plastic, nung in-invent yung plastic, di pa siguro na na-assess ng buo ano yung magiging impact nito, no? So, siguro ngayon, kung yung mga nagawa ng plastic noon, ma-realize nila na ganito pala kalaki yung magiging problema ng mundo sa plastic ngayon. Maybe we could have find a way, no? Paano ba, ano ba yung best way to create something? Maybe they could have used some material that's biodegradable para madaling matunaw yung plastic, which is sa ngayon, nasanay na kasi yung tao na puro ganitong way of production of plastic yung ginagawa. Kaya tuloy, lahat, hindi siya naiipon na yung basura, di ba? So, ikaw na part of the business, you need to consider sa design pa lang, ano yung requirements, ano yung pwede maging epekto nito, no, later on sa buong cycle, no. So upon doing the assessment, syempre sa procurement, ano ba yung mga requirements ninyo? Mention nga, yung mga pagbili ninyo, si purchasing department nyo, nakakaroon siya ng sariling process, procedure, na okay, lahat ng mga gamit na i-procure natin for this company, for this activity, all of them are environmental friendly. So they're meeting their specific task when it comes to environmental protection. No, you need to include environmental requirements. That's why pag tayo nagkakaroon ng pre-qualification, di ba? Part of that is yung environmental requirements. We need to identify them and relay it, communicate it to the suppliers na ito ang kailangan natin. So sa production itself, no, ano ba yung possible environmental impact na pwedeng nangyari, no? Sa transportation and delivery, ultimo mismo kahit wala na yung product sa'yo, nabenta mo na tapos ka na dapat, diba? Wala ka ng concern. But no, being a business, no, it's your responsibility to inform those whom you can influence. So by influence, part of that is your customers. Need to inform them, no, about the potential significant environmental impacts. No? Kaya hindi ba meron tayo minsan mga product na nakalagay sa likod na this is how you will dispose it. No? Papel to, kailangan dito to. O hazardous waste to, kailangan ganito mo siya i-dispose. Isasama mo siya sa mga hazardous waste kasi later on i-recycle. That's part of that, no, of usage. Kahit wala na sa yung product, you need to inform them how can they prevent yung environmental impacts by doing this and that. And lastly is yung end-of-life treatment, final disposal. No? So, let's say packaging mo is plastic, hindi nga ang hirap nga i-dispose ng plastic diba? Maybe we can use a paper kasi nare-recycle pa natin yung paper into something else. No? So those things from designing till the final disposal, that's the life cycle. And that's how you will consider your how you will do your EIA. You need to consider those aspects of your businesses. Okay, so as mentioned kanina, environmental aspect as per the standard, it's an element of organization's activities, products, or services that interacts or can interact with the environment, while the impact is the change to the environment, whether adverse or beneficial, fully or partially, resulting from organization's environmental aspects. Basically, ito yung epekto ng aspect mismo. So some of the examples is yung activity natin, let's say, is changing oil. So, ang possible aspect niyan is yun, air emission, no? Gumagamit ka ng oil, absorbance, no? Recycling of oil, and spills, no? So, ang possible impact niyan, syempre, madedegrade yung air quality, water quality, magkakaroon ng landfill, consumption of natural resources. Most common example rin, let's say, is yung operation of equipment, dust generation, air emission, and use of raw materials. So, ang possible impact, syempre, use of natural resources, degradation of air quality. So, ultimo sa bahay natin, no? Toilet flushing and hand washing. Hindi mo naman mapipigilan yan, no? Yung isang aspect niyan, syempre, gagamit ka ng tubig. That's a natural resources and it's not abundant, no? It will be a scarce resource. So, ang possible impact niyan, syempre, reuse of natural resources. Later on, baka maano na siya, no? Hindi na maging abundant. So, there are many aspect and impact. Kahit itong habang nag-zoom tayo ngayon, no? This is an activity that has its own aspect and impact. No? Tayo nag-zoom. Siyempre, aspect niyan is you're using electricity. No? So, siyempre, ang impact niya is consumption of natural resource. Consumption of energy resource. No? Kasi lahat naman ng kuryenteng ginagamit natin ngayon, at the moment, it's not yet renewable. So, lahat ng bagay na ginagawa natin will have their own aspect and impact. No? But, the idea is, hindi mo naman lahat ititigil ng operation mo. Ay, kasi may epekto to. Dapat hindi na ako nag-Zoom, dapat hindi na ako nag-laptop. Hindi ganun. No? Need to always consider yung social nga, sabi nga sa sustainability. Kasi lahat naman ng to ginagawa natin para rin sa tao. Kaya natin pinoprotektahan yung environment para rin dun sa future generation, which we're pertaining to the people. No? So you need to assess, balance, ano ba yung mas mahalaga? No? Ano ba yung kaya natin i-tolerate? No? Kung syempre, okay, gumagamit tayo ng electricity, syempre, nagko-consume tayo natural resource. Baka kasi naman, yung ginagawa natin, mas makakatulong rin, mas makaka-benefit, which later on also will have, will be beneficial sa environment, bigger, larger, have more impact in environmental protection, then maybe you can compromise. No? Okay? So, some example then dito is, yan, there can be an activity of blasting, no, sub-activity maintenance of creek blasting. So, ano ba yung magiging aspect nito? Use dust filter cartridges, in generation ng dust filter cartridges. No? Isang aspeto ng life cycle to sa final disposal. And yung description ng activity. So, for others, syempre, what they do, as mentioned din kanina, we need to evaluate and determine ano ba yung mga significant aspects. No? So part of that is, syempre, if we need to evaluate, no, and determine significance of each aspect, parang sinasabing gumamit tayo ng matrix, diba? So obviously, it depends on your process, your procedure, paano nyo gagawin yun. But for others, what they do, they have their own matrix, which if you will search, it's the same to the risk assessment. No?
Pasok si Papa.
Right? So, yun yung So, this is one of the example of EIA that we have done in our organization. Okay. So, we're done with EIA. We're done with recent opportunities. Now, we'll discuss about compliance obligations. Now, compliance obligations are legal requirements that an organization has to comply with, and other requirements that an organization has to or chooses to comply with. Ba't ganun yung sinasabi? So, ibig sabihin yan, yung compliance obligation, may mga iba't ibang aspeto siya. So, una, yung legal requirements. No? Yung legal requirements na yan, parte siya ng compliance obligation, wala kang choice kundi sundin yan. Otherwise, magsasara business mo. No? Pwede kang makasuhan, ma-finance ka, di ba? Di ka makakapag-operate without following this applicable mandatory legal requirements, which depends obviously to the place where you're doing your business. Kung sa Pilipinas, sa ibang bansa, sundin mo yung local regulations. So sa UAE, meron tayong Federal Law number 24, which basically lays out the environmental requirements, no, to protect the environment. Sa Pilipinas din, meron tayong mga environmental laws. Yung Philippine Constitution itself ng 1987, PD 1586 and PD 1151. So ito yung mga mandatory na sundan natin. Siyempre, meron din tayong applicable regulations, no? Na maybe hindi siya mandatory rin naman siya, no? Na dapat natin sundin kasi we're operating on that locality. So sa UAE, merong EAD or OSHAD, which basically governs yung municipality when it comes to environment, health, and safety. So in the Philippines, we have RA 8749, 9275, 6969, 9003, 972, 99512, CAA 1999, and CWA 2004. Okay? And then, yung statement dito na other requirements that an organization has to or comply with is covered by the other interested parties. Okay? So ito yung kanina na binanggit natin, no? Yung nag-identify tayo ng needs and expectations ng bawat interested parties natin. So doon sa needs and expectations, kailangan alamin natin ano-ano doon yung pwede nating, ano-ano doon yung committed tayong isasama sa list of compliance obligations natin, no? Kasi let's say client is ang requirement niya sa iyo is dapat ganito kadami yung dapat ganito ka implement ito environmental program, hindi naman required ng batas, no? So pwede mo siyang sabihin na pwede kang actually hindi sumunod kaso mawawalan ka ng baka mawalan ka ng kliyente, di ba? So parang it's your choice to comply, no? Pag di ka naman comply, wala rin naman, di ka naman mapa-final, makakapag-operate ka pa rin ng normal. Nawalan ka lang ng kliyente. So one example is itong standard mismo na ISO 14001. ISO 14001 is not mandatory. ISO does not have the authority to mandate companies, businesses, or anything, no, na mag-implement na management system, no? Ang ginagawa nila is nagbibigay lang sila ng standard, how you will do it. Kasi sabi ko nga kanina, maraming iba't ibang framework dyan. Baka yung US EPA mismo, meron silang sarili nilang framework when it comes to implementation of environmental management system, no? Even in the health and safety, may ibang framework rin, di ba? Meron tayo ng pang-American, meron tayo ng pang-European, international, depends on you. But it's not a requirement. But dahil nagpa-certify ka, okay? Then kailangan mo sundin yung standard. Kasi nagpa-certify ka eh, no? So, but kung yung sa pagbuo ng management system, kapag ka sinabi na ng batas na, kailangan to, nakalagay na yan, nakasulat na yan doon sa mismong DAO, di ba? Sa Pilipinas or dito sa UAE, no, may specific na nakamention pa lang, bumuo ka ng system. Bumuo ka ng system sa gusto mo. Pero kung paanong system yun, bahala ka. No, pwedeng sundin mo yung 14,000, pwedeng sundin mo yung iba. No? See, some of the environmental laws that we have in the Philippines, as mentioned kanina, PD 1586, Environmental Impact Statement System, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, 6969, Toxic Substances and Hazardous and Nuclear Waste, 9003, Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, Climate Change Act, Environmental Awareness and Education Act. So the idea is, ikaw na sa company, dapat alam mo ano-ano yung mga requirements na kailangan mong i-meet. Ano-ano yung mga compliance obligations mo, no? Kasi this can affect how you will implement, how you will run your business, no? So you just need to make sure na kahit asan ka pa, kahit anong lugar pa, you need to make sure na na-identify mo at a minimum yung legal requirements mo. Kasi sila yung pinaka-minimum requirement mo, legal requirements. No? Ano yung mga batas na kailangan mo sundin. And then, you can maintain a legal register. No? Example of that is dito. No? You have yung sa EIA mo, na classify mo ano-ano yung mga aspect mo. Ano-ano ba yung mga batas na nagre-refer dun sa aspect na yun para mas madali mo siyang madali mo siyang i-map out na okay, for this aspect, no, meron akong waste management, ano-ano ba yung applicable legislation, no? And ano yung specific na requirement nila? Na kunyari, ayan, dapat yung waste, ma-store siya securely. Nag-generate ka ng basura. No? So, ano ba yung batas na nagsasabi? Para at least alam mo na itong batas na to, kailangan ko itong inip. No? Kung hindi man batas, syempre, requirement ng interested party mo, di ba? Okay. Then obviously, ano ba yung relevance nito sa'yo? Ano yung control mo? No? Then lastly, you need to check yung compliance mo. You need to evaluate your compliance. No? Are you meeting the requirements? Maybe a portion of that. So how will you take action against that? No. Yan. So another example. Ito hiniram ko to dun sa previous training for 45,001. One example is yung integrated na kasi to compliance obligations, no? So at least it'll be easier kasi may mga certain activity ka naman na covering both health and safety environment. So you can easily map out, pinag-combine mo na yung health safety environment. Then you can monitor yung compliance nyo. Yung pag-monitor ng compliance nyo, kayo magde-determine yan. Ano ba yung frequency? Gusto nyo ba ng yearly? Gusto nyo ba ng biannual or quarterly, di ba? So, syempre, the best idea, which is sa amin, yung ginagawa namin, is quarterly. Kasi maraming batas na nagbabago, maraming batas na nakikreate. So, it's best to make sure na you're updated, no? Ensure na you're compliant with that. Kasi bukas makalawa, hindi mo alam, baka matsyempohan ka, ma-inspect ka, hindi ka nagko-comply, di ba? Siyempre, sino-sino yung nag-check ng compliance at kailan yung last review nyo? Okay. So, actions to address risks and opportunities, planning actions. So, ang organization daw dapat should plan to take actions to address its significant environmental aspect. Okay? Yung address its compliance obligations and risks and opportunities. You should also plan how to integrate and implement the actions into environmental management system process and other business processes and evaluate the effectiveness of these actions. So, kanina na-discuss natin na yung environmental aspects, compliance obligation, risks and opportunities. So, upon identifying them, dapat may gawin ka. No? And pagka na-identify mo na kung ano yung mga dapat mong gawin, dapat integrated siya sa business processes nyo. Otherwise, hindi siya magiging effective. No? Which is ito yung sinasabi nga natin kanina, yung life cycle perspective. No? So sa buong life cycle ng inyong products and services, you need to have a plan how you will integrate yung actions mo dyan doon sa buong process. No? And then, syempre, evaluate yung effectiveness of actions through inspections, audits, no? Yung mga records, monitoring, laboratory tests, ano yung resulta, no? Na-lessen ba yung environmental impact nyo, so on and so forth, no? Okay, 6.2, environmental objectives and planning to achieve them. So, objectives should be consistent with environmental policy. Okay? Kasi again, we're committed on doing something. So, dapat yung objectives nyo, will also lead dun sa pagiging committed nyo sa environmental policy. No? Also, it should be measurable. Should be able to monitor it, communicated to the people, and updated as appropriate. Okay? So, sinasabi nga natin, dapat ang objective natin is SMART. specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So ano-ano ba yung mga dapat natin consider sa paggawa ng objectives? So syempre, yung legal and compliance requirements, mention nga kanina, that's your minimum requirement. No? You can create an objective based on that. You can also consider yung significant aspects. No, maybe this year, dati wala naman kayong ganitong tong aspect na to is very minor lang naman. Tapos ngayong taon, naging significant na siya, di ba? Maybe you can consider that. No? Anyway, you're reviewing your EIA. You can also consider significant safety hazards. So as mentioned, parang magkadikit yung bitukan ng environment at ng safety. No? Pwede kasing yung sa safety na yun, ay magkaroon din ng environmental impact. No? Doon sa unknowingly. No? So also financial, operational, and business requirements. Okay? And the views of your interested parties. That's the reason why we're identifying yung needs and expectations. Maybe meron doon na hindi natin na-meet. No? You can include them, consider them in the development of your environmental objectives. Some example would be, kung ang objective nyo is reduce water consumption. Siyempre, you need to set kailan yung target nyo. Sabi nga, it should be realistic, measurable. So, dito nakalagay na, magsiset tayo ng water use baseline ng ganitong period. Ito yung plan of action nyo rin. No? Then, upon knowing yung baseline nyo, then, pwede na kayo mag-benchmark and mag-set ano ba yung target nyo. Ano to, 20% reduction, no? Depends. Ang paggawa naman ng objective is hindi lang sa naisip mo. You'll need to review your previous performance, your environmental performance. No? If there's something for you to improve, you can use that. No? That'll be your basis to create and develop your environmental objectives. No? Sino-sino ba yung involved parties? No? You need to identify sino yung pinaka-involved parties. By involved parties, not saying na sila lang yung gagawa. So, syempre, buong company or buong organization is involved doon sa pag-ensure na magiging successful yung environmental objective. But sila yung parang key people. No? Sa kanila manggagaling. No? Siguro na-identify nyo na itong mga department na to, yung production, yan yung pinaka-high user na ng water. So, maybe we can involve them heavily. No? Sa engineering, baka makagawa sila ng something, mapag-design sila na hindi na kailangan ng mataas na water consumption. No? Siyempre, si accounting din. They'll be able to monitor data. No? Kasi sa kanila, nagbabayad sila ng utility bills. No? They will be able to see yung gano'n na ba kataas yung consumption? Are we really is it really effective ba? No? Yan, reduction of chemical spill. Siyempre, objective nyo, stop buying chemicals that contain carcinogens, which is both safety and environment. Okay? Then improve employee awareness. No? Target mo, make sure na lahat ng tao is aware sa EMS. Involved parties, siyempre lahat na. Okay? Alright. So, tapos na tayo sa clauses 4, 5, and 6. Sa 6, we have discussed about the risks and opportunities, the environmental aspects, no? The environmental objectives, and planning to achieve them, how we can achieve them, how we can integrate those risk opportunities, aspects, everything into our process with the thinking of life cycle. That and life cycle perspective. So now we will be going to support. So sa support, meron tayong 5 subclauses, which is the resources, competence, awareness, communication, documented information. So if you can see, these clauses are common sa iba pang standards. It's the same. Because in any management system, you will always need resources. You'll always need competence. You'll make sure that people are aware of what you're doing, communication, and documented information. Okay? So what I will just do is I will just relate this to the environment. So resources, as mentioned, organization shall determine and provide the resources needed for the establishment, implementation, maintenance, and continual improvement of environmental management system. No? So during the review, during the management review, we discuss ano ba yung mga resources na kailangan, no? You're reviewing the environmental performance of your company. So maybe there's something to improve, no? There's something that you're not doing right, no? And maybe that's because of the lack of resources. So you need to make sure that that's provided, no? If ang kailangan nyo is budget to make sure to procure materials na in the long run will lessen the impact of your company to the environment or lessen the carbon footprint, no? So the company should be able to provide those resources that's required. So competence. So organization shall determine the necessary competence of the person doing the work under its control, no? So they should be able to also ensure that these people are competent, and they should determine the training needs of these people with respect to environmental management system. And where applicable, take actions to acquire the necessary competence and evaluate the effectiveness of these actions. No? So let's say mag-hire ka ng tao, no? You've already laid out yung mga environmental responsibilities nila through the job description, no? So you need to make sure na kayang competent yung taong sundin yun. Baka naman na, okay, competent ka siya, pero hindi naman niya ginagawa yung duty niya, no? O dapat, ito lang yung, dapat sundin niya tong process na to kasi this one lessens the possibility of having oil spill. So let's say, operator siya sa equipment. Kaso hindi naman niya sinusunod eh. No? Yung ginagamit niya mga materials, let's say rugs, no? Na nagko-contain ng mga oils, no? Lubricants, tinatapon niya lang kung saan-saan, sinasama niya sa general waste, no? So those things, no? And also, baka wala rin siya training. So dapat ikaw na company, you need to make sure na you have provided the necessary training. Dapat aware siya na, okay, baka hindi naintindihan masyado yung duty niya. So maybe what we can do, we can provide an awareness session, no? Simple lang para sa mga staff, para aware sila ano ba yung dapat nilang gawin, no? Then lastly, upon giving that training, yung awareness, kung ano man, dapat i-evaluate mo. Ganun pa rin ba? May problema pa rin ba? Baka naman kasi hindi pa rin nila naintindihan. Baka hindi mo na-relay lahat ng information. Or may something ba, ganun ba talaga ugali nila? Ano yung pwedeng gawin natin? Can we impose a disciplinary action? Yan. No? So yun. Then nabanggit nga natin kanina, awareness. So an organization shall ensure that people are aware of environmental policy. So that's the main thing, no? Kasi nga, yun nga yung nagsiset out ng commitment ng company, no? Committed to protect the environment. Dapat aware yung mga tao, no? Saan ba sila committed? Okay? Ano-ano ba yung significant environmental aspects? Kasi baka hindi naman nila alam kaya ginagawa nila yung bagay na dapat di nila gawin. No? So you need to explain to them na, oy, dapat hindi mo to gawin. O pagkatapos yung gumamit ng, let's say, ng lathe machine na to, kailangan iayusin nyo to, ganun. Kasi ito yung mangyayari niyan eh. No? So, syempre, yung contribution nila to the effectiveness of environmental management system. So, as mentioned nga kanina, no, one of the benefits is yung awareness ng mga tao in the environmental issues and yung participation and engagement nila. Kasi, mas mamomotivate yung tao pag alam nila na nakaka-contribute sila. Paano nila gagawin? No? Kumbaga, part sila ng team eh. Hindi sila excluded. Okay? Then yung implications of not conforming. Kasi, at the end of the day, we need to consider the human behavior. No? Na baka kahit ano gawin mo, binigay mo na lahat, inintindi mo na, hindi ka pa rin sinusunod. Hindi ganito pa rin yung ginagawang sistema ng tao. No? May sarili siyang mundo. So dapat, you need to make sure na aware sila na ito yung mangyayari kapag hindi sila sumunod sa requirements ng inyong EMS. No? Communication. So companies should establish, implement, and maintain processes needed for communication. So by that, it should consider what it will communicate, when to communicate, with whom to communicate, and how to communicate. You should also consider yung diversity aspect. So as mentioned nga, ang problema dito sa abroad, dahil napaka-diverse ng kultura, syempre may kani-kanila rin yung mga languages. Kailangan mas mai-relay mo sa kanila in such a way na maiintindihan nila. Kasi baka nag-uusap kayo, hindi ka na pala naiintindihan, di ba? Ngayon, hindi rin mafu-fulfill yung hinihingi mo requirement. So you should also ensure the views of internal, external interested parties are considered, lalo na sa environment. No? Kasi baka yung activity mo, nakaka-apekto na dun sa pamumuhay ng local community mo. No? Pati yung mga government authorities, no? They always come for inspection. So they for sure will recommend something. So when they do, you need to consider them. No? And whatever requirements or suggestions that they have given, observation, you need to relay it to the people down the line para aware sila. No? So, pag sinabi, let's say, ng authority na para ang taas ng consumption niya ng electricity for this month, masyado na siya for a small company, ganun-ganun. No? So you need to relay the information. You need to do something. No? You need to create a program. How will you take action against that? And also, consider the legal and other requirements. Kung may bagong batas na pinatupad or may amendment sa batas, you need to relay that information para masiguradong na-meet natin, na-comply natin yung mga obligations na yun. So some example of internal communications, communicating environmental objectives, targets, raising awareness of environmental issue, communicating the environmental policy, advising of non-conformance to the relevant department heads, especially during the audit, reporting incidents arising from abnormal or emergency operations to senior management. Huwag nyo i-contain sa inyo na parang, ganito yung environmental incident. Dapat alam rin ng top management, na senior management. You should be, some examples also of external communications, dealing with environmental complaints or proactively inviting such stakeholders or green pressure groups. Yung pag-involve ng mga NGOs sa inyong operation, no? Para mas matulungan kayo, ma-foster yung relationship nyo, and mas makapag-benefit kayo in the successful implementation of EMS. Siyempre, responding to the media inquiries, especially in the event of an incident. So that's some examples of communication. Lastly, for the support is the documented information. So the organization shall include documented information required by this document and documented information determined by the organization. So doon sa standard, kung meron kayong copy, pag nabasa nyo, meron daw mga sinasabing shall be maintained as a documented information. No? So ibig sabihin nun, yun yung mga mandatory documents as you can see from the screen. No? Ito yung mga mandatory documents as per the standard. Okay? And syempre, meron din mga documented information na determined by the organization. No? So let's say, hindi siya personally nire-require na standard, but since it'll be part of your evidence, no, to ensure na or to show na na-meet mo tong specific requirement, then you have determined na you will just maintain this documented information. So these are some of the examples of the mandatory documents. So when creating and updating documented information, organization shall ensure appropriate identification and description. So dapat properly identified and described yung documented information. So let's say it's a QHSE plan, or maybe a QHSE procedures, or anong specific procedure na yun. Sorry. So normally we will put a title, date, author, or reference number. Especially yung reference number para malaman natin, or yung revision number, sorry, para malaman natin, ito ba yung pinaka-latest, no? Baka kasi hindi latest yung pinagre-referan. Then, the format, syempre, need to consider, are we doing it soft copy or hard copy? No? Pati yung language, maiintindihan ba to ng mga tao pag sinulat mo sa local language? Baka meron kayong iba't ibang lahi, no? So you need to consider that. Maybe try to make it available in both language, or kung syempre baka plano yan, no? Hindi mo naman siya kayang gawing available sa lahat. Maybe you can compress the information in such a way na mas madali siya ma-absorb ng mga tao. Okay? So dito sa UAE, hindi na kasi ang Dubai is may strategy of paperless. Ayun din yung ginagawa ng filsa, no, na instead na ipiprint pa, no, magkaroon ka ng hard copy, but hindi na tayo magkaroon ng soft copy. Natutulungan pa natin yung environment. Then at the same time, you're retaining the documented information easier. Pwede mo siyang i-print anytime, di ba? Then, review and approval for suitability and adequacy. So, para malaman na, okay, this has been reviewed and approved. No, this is fine. Baka kasi draft copy lang yung binabasa mo, hindi mo sure, implement mo ba yan? Baka may mali pa doon, di ba? Baka may kailangan pang amend. Documented information required by the standard shall be controlled to ensure it is available and suitable for use where and when it is needed, okay? And it is adequately protected. So if it's a confidential information, then obviously you need to make sure na only those authorized people will have access to it, okay? And should be available and suitable for use. Kung puro mga nasa office naman siya, then maybe you can have that documented information in soft copy. All right, so we're done with the support. Now we're in operation. So in operation, there are two subclauses: operational planning and control, and emergency preparedness and response. Okay. Sa operational planning and control, sinasabi dito that the organizations shall establish, implement, control, and maintain processes needed to meet environmental management system. Organizations shall establish controls as appropriate to ensure that its environmental requirements are addressed. No? Kaya sinasabi nga natin, na-identify na natin yung aspects, yung impacts nila through the life cycle perspective, no? Considering the life cycle perspective. So dapat mag-establish tayo ng controls, no? And upon which obviously naplano mo na siya during the planning part. So now implement mo na siya, no? So buong process na 'yon, no? Kaya nabanggit dito, addressing the design development for the product service, considering each life cycle stage. So nung nagawa ka ng EIA, consider mo yung life cycle perspective. Ngayon na mag-establish ka ng controls, you need also to consider each life cycle stage. And you need to implement controls. No? Then, you need to determine yung environmental requirements for the procurement of products and services, no? Which will be covered anyway kung i-consider mo yung life cycle perspective. No? You will establish controls, so for sure, you will be able to identify environmental requirements mo during the procurement of products and services. Okay? You need to also communicate the relevant environmental requirements to external providers, including contractors. So if you have contractors, you have this environmental controls, you need to make sure that this is relayed, no, to them. Para aware sila kung ano yung mga dapat nilang sundin, ano yung dapat nilang gawin. And you need to consider the need to provide information about potential significant environmental impacts. So ito yung sinasabi natin kanina sa communication na dapat alam din nila ano yung possible impact ng ginagawa nila pag di nila nagawa. So hindi ka lang nagsabi ng ano dapat nilang gawin, magsasabi ka rin ano yung pwedeng mangyari pag di nila nagawa. Okay, one example is, let's say yung process nyo is in the design office, yung input, obviously you will be using papers, inks, IT equipment, no? Energy, customer specification, then your output will be the design, drawings, and support material. So ano ba yung significant environmental aspects, no? Considering a life cycle perspective. So maybe during the procurement, you need to consider yung procurement ng mga stationaries, no? You will also need to consider yung usage of electricity, no, during the operation. And throughout the life cycle, na habang kayo yung may full control, syempre yung energy usage, no? You will use a scarce resource such as gas. No? So example of controls, which again considers life cycle perspective, no? During the procurement, maybe you can implement purchasing policy, procedures, requirements, environmental requirements, incorporating it when selecting your vendors, process flow charts, training, IT procedures, draft reviews. No? Maybe you can incorporate environmental requirements during the training. Also in the equipment, maybe you can set your the settings of your equipment to default na magpiprint lang siya ng, let's say, color black or yung lesser consumption ng toner. Meron lagi yun, save ink, diba? Save toner. So, mas magpiprint ka na sandalak pero medyo malabo yung color kasi pinapreserve yung usage ng toner. Ganun. So, we can do that. No? And there are many ways to implement your controls. So as long as you're considering the life cycle perspective. Okay. 8.2, emergency preparedness and response. So organizations shall establish, implement, and maintain processes needed to prepare for and respond to potential emergency situations. And then they need to review and revise the importance of learnings from incidents. Lastly, organizations shall periodically test those planned response actions where practicable. Okay, so ano ba yung common na emergency plan na sineset up natin? Kunyari, nag-work kayo sa sewage treatment plant. Siyempre, ano yan? Wastewater yan. So, possible na magkaroon ng spill, di ba? So, ano ba yung mga dapat ninyong gawin in case of spill? Paano nyo i-contain? Yeah? And then you need to review, effective ba siya? So, during the drill, syempre magkakaroon ng drill, ano yung naging outcome ng drill na yun, no? Masabi mo bang effective yung drill nyo? Is there a way, effective yung plan nyo? Is there a way to improve it? Then, obviously, periodically test. Para malaman, maintain mo yung integrity ng emergency plan nyo. So, yung steps to set up emergency plan is first you need to identify, no, based from your operation, your activities, ano yung mga possible environmental emergencies na pwede mangyari. You may have oil spill, no, wastewater, spill of the wastewater from the sewage plant, so on and so forth. No? Then, how can you prevent that? Ano ba yung ways para ma-prevent mo? Then, you need to identify your emergency plan. No? Ano ba yung mga dapat mong gawin in case mangyari talaga to? Sino-sino ba yung dapat mong tawagan? Paano yung magiging proseso? Ano-ano ba yung resources na kailangan nyo in case of an emergency? No? Then, you need to identify yung training and drills. Siyempre, nag-set ka ng emergency plan. Let's say, containment ng oil spill. So dapat yung mga tao na na-identify mo na may role dun sa emergency plan na yun, dapat you need to make sure that they're trained. Alam nila yung gagawin nila, no? Lalo na kung sila pala yung incident commander, no? Sino ba yun dapat nilang kontakin? Ano yung unang step na gagawin nila? Tatawagan ba nila agad yung authority, no? Ano yung resources, no? And then you need to practice that. Kasi baka naman, theoretically, alam na nila, pero during the drill, baka mataranta sila, diba? Then after that, you need to evaluate and make sure na anything na sa tingin niyo pwede parang lacking, you need to improve it. No? As in, you need to make sure na in case of a real emergency, the company is prepared. Okay? Then, we're done with the plan and the do part. So now we're in the check part of the PDCA. So that's the performance evaluation. So in the performance evaluation, there are 3 sub-clauses, which is the monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation, internal audit, and management review. In the monitoring, the organization shall establish, implement, and maintain processes needed to evaluate fulfillment of its compliance obligation. So the organization shall determine the frequency that compliance will be evaluated. So gaano ba kadalas? Sabi ko nga kanina, depende yan sa inyo. Sa amin, kino-consider namin na quarterly yung evaluation para mas ma-monitor namin saan kami naglalak. No? You also need to evaluate compliance and take action if needed. No? So upon evaluation, ano yung dapat mong gawin? And maintain knowledge and understanding of its compliance status. So, yung common performance indicators natin when we monitor are the following. Number 1, are we meeting environmental objectives? If yes, ilan doon? Number of environmental objectives and targets met. Maybe dahil nga nasa operation niya is hazardous. So you need to consider ilan sa mga tao mo ang nag-file ng sick leave related dun sa work environment. Baka nahihilo raw sila, di ba? Tuwing nagtatrabaho sila dito, nahihilo sila, naantok sila, nagsusuka sila. Baka meron ng problema dun sa environment na yun. No? Percentage of employees completing environmental training. No? So, syempre, as much as possible, you need to, your target is to make sure that your people are competent when it comes to the effective implementation of EMS. No? So, dapat nire-refresh the training mo sila. No? Kung gusto mo, magpadala ka pa ng mas maraming tao. Okay? Then, energy or water use per unit of production. If your target is to lessen the use of utilities such as water or electricity, you might want to monitor that. That's one of your performance indicators. Solid waste recycled, reuse, number of complaints from the community. Baka naman yung activity ninyo nakaka-apekto na sa local community. Yung environment. Baka nauubos nyo masyado. Let's say, sobrang high user kayo ng water. Yung tubig nyo yun, sinishare nyo lang within the locality. No? So, the community might do something against that. No? They might complain. So, you need to consider them. Siyempre, pollution generated per unit of product or service. So, sa every service na ginagawa mo, sa each stage of your production, you need to check ano ba yung mga environmental impacts na nag-generate. No? And you need to consider that as part of your performance indicator. Kasi nga, ang target mo sa EMS is to protect the environment. Baka hindi ganun yung nangyayari. That's why you need to monitor them. The number of instances of non-compliance. Because syempre, again, you want to make sure that you're complying with the obligations. And maybe during the year or whatever the frequency is, marami kang non-compliance. No? So you're not achieving your intended outcome. Okay? Some example is, let's say, anti-corrosive paint eggs. Your objective is to maintain compliance. Your operational control is coating and cleaning procedure. Ito yung mga iba't ibang procedure ninyo. Then your monitoring and measurement, compliance audit, regulatory reporting, EMS audit, even the inspection itself. You can see it's also part of your monitoring tool, your method of monitoring. Okay? Solid waste from the unmasking process. So your objective is to investigate the potential for reduction. You want to reduce the generation of your solid waste. No? So your operational control is your solid waste reduction EMP. You have a process for that. And your monitoring and measurement method is waste reduction tracking metric or EMS audit. They can, again, inspection. No? Okay. So also part of that is we need to monitor yung compliance natin. No? Kasi dito sa compliance obligation register natin, nakapaloob na dyan yung needs and expectations. So are we meeting that when it comes to the environment? Diba? So if no, then we need to, kasi some of them are like mandatory. Diba? So we need to check them. And if no, what can we do para ma-ensure na ma-meet natin siya? Okay? Then, one of the performance evaluation, which we are familiar with, is internal audit. So companies should conduct internal audits at planned intervals to provide information on whether the environmental management system conforms to its own requirements, procedures, as well as the requirements of the standard. Okay. Also, you need to, the company should monitor if EMS is effectively implemented and maintained. So that's why we do internal audit. Internal audit's purpose is to check whether are there gaps in the system, are there other items that we need to improve, no? Hindi ang sa audit hindi tinitingnan yung tao, ang tinitingnan is yung proseso. Paano ba natin mai-improve yung proseso? Kasi may iba na parang pag audit, parang natataranta anong gagawin, no? Walang taong tinitingnan dyan. Ang tinitingnan dyan is yung sistema. Saan pwede mag-improve yung company para masiguradong effective yung sistema niyo? Then, lastly, management review. So, management review will have, in the standard, meron tayong mga different requirements na dapat i-consider natin during the management review. So, dito nabubuo yung agenda, kung ano ba yung status ng previous actions, no, of actions from the previous management review, no, yung mga internal external issues, need and expectation, mga significant environmental aspects, risks and opportunities that should have been considered as well. Then pati yung objectives natin, environmental objectives, are we meeting that? Kasi syempre nag-set yung company, ano na yung status, di ba? Yung information about sa organization environmental performance, where are we? No, nag-implement tayo nito. No? Is it effective? No, that's the main thing. Is it effective? Kasi kung hindi, then there's something wrong, diba? You need to do something. Then yung adequacy resources. Kasi this time, you can raise it to the, this will be raised to the management. Na we need these resources to make sure that the EMS are effectively implemented. Then obviously relevant communications and opportunities for continual improvement. So lahat, yung pinaka-content na environmental management system ninyo, pag-uusapan nyo during management review at titingnan nyo kung effective ba. Kung hindi, saan pa tayo pwedeng, ano yung kulang? Saan tayo pwedeng mag-improve? That's part of our management review. So typical agenda, pag-uusapan mo yung objectives, are the objectives stated in the environmental policy being met? Does the organization have the continuing capacity to identify environmental aspects? Kung inaalaw ba ng organization to give a measure of significance to this aspect? Have the operational controls were put in place achieve the desired levels of control? Effective ba yung corrective actions nyo? Are internal audits effective in identifying non-conformance? And is environmental policy sufficient for the forthcoming 12 months? Normally, management review is being done on a yearly basis, no, to see the real performance. Kasi kung masyadong frequent yung management review nyo, syempre, baka hindi nyo makita yung significant changes, no? Yung significant changes, either positive or negative. But again, it depends, no? Sometimes, kung sobrang critical ng operation ninyo, sa case namin, sa project namin, 2 times a year yung aming management review. Pero kung malakihan na, corporate level na, ano na siya, once a year na lang, no? Okay, we're in the last clause of ISO 14001, which is the improvement. And in the improvement, we have 3 sub-clauses. Yung general, doing just the general information, but meaning the non-conformity and corrective action and continual improvement. So, in the improvement clause, the organization shall determine the opportunities for improvement and implement necessary actions to achieve them. So, example, after na management review nyo, may panibagong actions na naman ulit kayong mag-generate. No? Dahil yun yung plano nyo gawin for the next 12 months. Kung yearly yung, yearly yung management review nyo. So, upon identifying opportunities for improvement, you need to implement actions. Paano nyo i-roll out tong na-identify nyo sa review nyo na dapat gawin natin to, di ba? Then, you need to also consider the results from analysis and evaluation of environmental performance, compliance, internal audits, and management review. So, yun nga yung nabanggit kanina. Not just in management review, but in all of your, after conducting your performance evaluation, you need to identify how will you implement them for your improvement, continual improvement. So, non-conformity and corrective action. When a non-conformity occurs, the organization shall react to the non-conformity. They need to identify and make sure na yung non-conformity na yun is ma-actionan agad. Kasi lalo na kung regulation, if we're talking about legal requirement, then if you will let the time pass by, the government may give you a fine, diba? It may cause disruption in your activity, in your operation. Need to evaluate the need for action to eliminate the cause of the non-conformity. So by doing that, kailangan alamin mo muna ano ba yung rason ng non-conformity ninyo. Then upon knowing yung root cause, dapat i-evaluate paano natin masisiguradong hindi na maulit yun, which is yung corrective action nyo, no? To prevent its recurrence. Then, implement any action needed. Kung you're not just looking dun sa corrective action na ginawa ninyo, but you will also need to think ahead, no? Ano ba yung possible pang pwedeng mangyari? Risk-based approach nga diba? Na posibleng baka mangyari rin to sa ganitong operation ninyo. So let's say sa operation A nangyari to. No? Baka mangyari din yan sa ibang sangay ng business nyo. So you can improve by also considering that. No? Then review the effectiveness of any corrective action taken. So you need to verify first whether have they been implemented? Are they effective? Did it satisfy? No? Or will it prevent recurrence ba ng non-conformity na yun? And then, you make changes to the environmental management system para hindi na maulit-ulit siya. Then, continual improvement. Organizations shall continually improve the suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of the environmental management system to enhance environmental performance. Okay, some of the factors influencing improvement includes yung commitment ng top management. Maybe they can set environmental vision, no, or environmental program within the company, no, not just the corporate policy. They may take actions, no, they can lead them total involvement of employees. So green teams are being set up to tackle environmental problems. You may want to initiate a program where merong mga volunteers from different departments of your company who will lead this initiative of reducing, let's say, the use of plastics, no? Training. So the more you train people on environmental awareness, the more na yung knowledge na yun, it'll be ingrained with them. Then, use of green products or process design. Designing production processes in such a way that design has a minimal adverse impact to the environment. Then, supplier management. So, environmental performance used as one of criteria when choosing supplier. Okay, you can include that in your pre-qualification. Then measurement, objective measurements established to gauge the level of environmental performance. Baka kasi nung nagre-review kayo, napaka-subjective ng monitoring nyo, ng measurement. So, hindi siya ganun ka-reliant, no? Maybe, what you can do is to have an objective measurements para mas maging accurate yung data nyo. Then information management. Environmental information must satisfy 4 main criteria: timeliness, accessibility, accuracy, and relevance. So process identified to plan continual improvement. Ano ba yung pinaka pwede natin gawin, no, to consider or to plan for your continual improvement? First is the use of environmental objective. Iyon yung pinaka-best. Kaya upon reviewing your system, no, for you to take action, you want to set another objective, no, para mas ma-improve mo. Kung let's say ikaw ngayon na company, wala pa kayo, kunyari, mas high usage kayo ng paper. So your objective for the next year or the next cycle is to reduce the usage of paper within the office. Upon assessing your previous performance, na identify mo target of 35% reduction. So that's one way you can continually improve. You're setting objectives. Again, after completing one, you're challenging your company how you can further improve. And then use of risk-based thinking for continual improvement. A wastewater treatment process is tested for chemical composition and treated before released to municipal sewage system. Okay? A risk that errors could potentially happen with the treatment and lead to contamination and fine from authorities. So it hasn't happened yet, but because of your risk-based thinking approach, no, pinipreempt mo na, nag-iisip ka na possible na ito yung mangyari. So to prevent that, you want to do something, you want to initiate something, no, which obviously will help the company to continually improve its environmental performance. Okay, so na-discuss natin yung buong environmental management system. And ang pinaka-bottom line is, company, with the help of the EMS, syempre, would always want to meet yung pinaka-goal ng management system, to protect the environment. This EMS just lays out how to do it, but we should always keep in mind na yung pinaka-target natin is yung protection ng environment. That's the main essence of this EMS. So, thank you sa mga nakapakinig. I think more than 2 hours din tayo.
Galing, galing.